Hello dear students, welcome to Sri Ganga Tutorials. In this session, I'm going to discuss about a concept called electron transport system and oxidative phosphorylation. Let's take an overview of this concept. Let's see in the concept. The first one, here electron transport system is mainly present in inner mitochondrial membrane. As we know that the electron transport system mainly includes electron carriers which arranged in the inner membrane of mitochondria. As we know that mitochondria is a powerhouse of the cell because it can have the ability to prepare energy molecules ATP, and here those electrons carrier will be present mainly in the inner mitochondrial space. And how they will prepare energy? So usually the energy will be prepared by the molecules called NADH and as well as FADH molecules. They pass through a series of these electron carriers, and those we can call it as complex 1, 2, 3 and as well as 4. So they mainly these complexes arranged from complex 1 to complex 3 and then complex 2 and then complex 4. Okay, and these complexes arrange in the case of mitochondria inner membrane. Okay, inner membrane of the mitochondria. And then these molecules helpful for the production of energy, and that energy resource used by the complexes, and they helpful for the conduction of H plus ions from matrix to the intermembrane space. So look at here the point. In the third point, given the flow of electrons is coupled to pumping of H plus from matrix to intermembrane space. So whatever the energy we get from the NADH and as well as FADH2, those electrons helpful for the transportation of electrons or the protons. Usually the protons will move from matrix to intermembrane space. Okay, which is actually done by the H plus ions will be mainly transported from matrix to intermembrane space by the use of energy source, that is electrons. Okay, by the electron carrier. And this movement of H plus ions from intermembrane space, that is from matrix to intermembrane space, that will create an electrical or electrochemical proton gradient. Okay, and here the proton gradient with drives ATP synthesis by ATP molecule, or that is what ATP synthase complex we can include as complex number 5. So this synthesis of ATP by the enzyme called ATP synthase complex, so this we can call it as a oxidative phosphorylation. Okay, so these are the main key points of this concept electron transport system. Let's begin how the electrons carriers arranged in a mitochondrial inner membrane. Okay, let's see here. This is the concept. In this one, electrons carriers mainly arranged in the inner membrane space like this here. ಮೊದಲನೇದಾಗಿ complex 1 which is also known as NADH dehydrogenase, and after that the complex number 3. So remember, complex number 1 ಆದಮೇಲೆ complex number 3 ಇರೋದಿಲ್ಲ. So after complex number 1 NADH dehydrogenase, and next complex number 3 will be occur, and which is known as a cytochrome BC1. Okay, and then after that 3 there is a presence of a complex number 2, and here this complex number 2 is also known as a succinate dehydrogenase enzyme, will carry the electrons. Okay, and will just transport the electron to complex number 3, and afterwards there is an arrangement of complex number 4, and this complex number 4, which we can also call it as a cytochrome C oxidase. Okay, and finally the complex number 5, which we can call it as a F0 F1 particle, also known as ATP synthase enzyme, will be involved in the synthesis of ATP from ADP. Okay, let's begin here. As you know that the NADH molecule, FADH molecules prepared by the process called glycolysis and as well as Krebs cycles, they used here to prepare ATP. Okay, let's begin here. See, in the case of mitochondria, look at the arrangement here. Okay, you just look at the complex number 1 and remaining all concept arranged like this only. Observe carefully. See here, we taken, I will take in highlighting. See here, intermembrane space, and here inner mitochondrial matrix, and as well as a matrix. See, as you know that matrix which already contains a H plus ion concentration, and the inner mitochondrial membrane will contains the arrangement of electron carriers, and here this space we can call it as a intermembrane space. That means the space between outer and as well as the inner membrane of the mitochondria, and which is high in the H plus concentration after the transport from matrix to intermembrane space. Let's begin here how those electrons will be transferred, or H plus ion transfer from matrix to the intermembrane space. So look at the first one, complex number 1. This complex number 1, which is also known as NADH dehydrogenase enzyme. So this NADH dehydrogenase enzyme will convert NADH to NAD. See here, one NADH molecule will produces nearly 2 H plus ions. Okay, which produces 2 H plus ions. But you remember here, this complex number 1 will transport H plus ions, nearly 4 H plus ions from matrix to the intermembrane space. ಸೊ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ಬೋದು, ಒಂದು NADH ಮಾಲಿಕ್ಯೂಲಿಂದ 2 H ಪ್ಲಸ್ ಅಯಾನ್ ರಿಲೀಸ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಆದರೆ, ಕಾಂಪ್ಲೆಕ್ಸ್ ನಂಬರ್ 1ಇಂದ ಇಲ್ಲಿ 4 H ಪ್ಲಸ್ ಅಯಾನ್ಸ್ಗಳು ಪಾಸ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾವೆ. ವಾಟ್ ಇಸ್ ದ ಮೀನಿಂಗ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿಸ್ ಕಾನ್ಸೆಪ್ಟ್ ಹಿಯರ್? ಸಿ, ಲುಕ್ ಎಟ್ ದ ಕಾನ್ಸೆಪ್ಟ್ ಕ್ಲಿಯರ್ಲಿ. ಯಾವಾಗ NADH ಮಾಲಿಕ್ಯೂಲು ಬ್ರೇಕ್ ಆಗಿ NAD ಪ್ಲಸ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೋ, ಇಟ್ ವಿಲ್ ರಿಲೀಸಸ್ 2 H ಪ್ಲಸ್ ಅಯಾನ್ಸ್, ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಅದೇ ರೀತಿಯಾಗಿ ಇಟ್ ರಿಲೀಸಸ್ ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್. ಸೊ 2 electrons will be released, and by the help of 2 electrons, these electrons carried by the FMN and as well as FES receptors in the complex number 1, and by the use of electron energy, see here, complex number 1 will transport 4 H plus ions from matrix to intermembrane space. ನೆನಪಿರಲಿ, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಇಂಟರ್ಮೆಂಬ್ರೇನ್ ಸ್ಪೇಸಲ್ಲಿ ಬರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ H ಪ್ಲಸ್ ಅಯಾನ್ಸ್ಗಳು NADH ಇಂದ ಬರೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ದೇ ಆ್ಯಕ್ಚುಲಿ ಕಮ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ಮ್ಯಾಟ್ರಿಕ್ಸ್, ನಾಟ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ NADH molecule. So NADH molecule will yield only the electrons, and complex number 1 will use that electron energy and transport 4 H plus ions from matrix to the intermembrane space. Okay, is it clear? And in the next one, complex number 3. So remember here, complex number 3 mainly carries the electrons, and here, which is also known as cytochrome BC1, because complex number 3, which contains mainly 3 electron carriers, the cytochrome B, FES, and as well as cytochrome C3. Sorry, that is what, C1. So here, cytochrome BC1 we can call it as, and here these are the electron carriers will mainly carry the electrons by the complexes, and here whatever the electrons released in the case of complex number 3, and will also uses electron resource, and those electrons mainly carried by the complex number 1 to complex number 3 with the help of a carrier which is known as UQ. UQ means ubiquinone. Okay, ubiquinone. So this ubiquinone electron carrier will mainly carry the electrons from complex number 1, NADH dehydrogenase complex, to complex number 3. So complex number 1 in the electrons complex number 3 get transfer ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾವೆ by the help of electron carrier which is known as ubiquinone. Okay, and here whenever electron carried through the ubiquinone, it will carry a negative charge, and H plus ions will bind to the ubiquinone and will becomes ubiquinone hydrogen, and those electrons transfer to the complex number 3. So with the use of that electron here, with the use of that electron energy, complex number 3 also transfer 4 electrons, 4 H plus ions, not electrons, 4 H plus ions from matrix to intermembrane space. Okay, so listen carefully. By using the energy from the electron, complex number 3 also transfer 4 H plus ions from matrix to intermembrane space. So just remember, ಕಾಂಪ್ಲೆಕ್ಸ್ ನಂಬರ್ 1ನಲ್ಲಿ NADH ಮಾಲಿಕ್ಯೂಲ್ ಇತ್ತು. ಹಾಗಾದರೆ NADH ಮಾಲಿಕ್ಯೂಲ್ ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಾನ್ನ ಪ್ರೊಡ್ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ, ಓನ್ಲಿ 2 ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ 2 H+ ಅಯಾನ್ಸ್. ಬಟ್ ಇಲ್ಲಿ 4 ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಾನ್ H+ ಅಯಾನ್ಗಳು ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಫರ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾವೆ. ದಿಸ್ ಈಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ NADH ಮಾಲಿಕ್ಯೂಲ್ ಬಟ್ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ಮ್ಯಾಟ್ರಿಕ್ಸ್. ಸೊ ಇನ್ ದ ಸೇಮ್ ಕೈಂಡ್, ಸೊ ಯು look at here in the complex number 3, 4 H+ ions will be transferred from matrix to intermembrane space. That is actually used by the electrons in the case of complex number 3. Okay, next in between complex number 3 and 4 there is a presence of complex number 2, which is also known as a succinate dehydrogenase. ನೋಡಿ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಅರೇಂಜ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ನಾವು ನೋಡಿದಾಗ ಕಾಂಪ್ಲೆಕ್ಸ್ ನಂಬರ್ 1 ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಅದಾದಮೇಲೆ ಕಾಂಪ್ಲೆಕ್ಸ್ ನಂಬರ್ 3 ಇದೆ, and to the next complex number 2 which is present, and here this complex number 2 will also known as a succinate dehydrogenase, and which mainly yield an electrons from the breakdown of a molecule called FADH2 molecule, and this FADH2 molecule will also yield an energy. Nearly 2 ATP molecules will form by this FADH2 molecule, and here this also produces 2 electrons, and here those electrons will be carried by the electron carriers in the case of a complex number 2, and they transfer to a complex number 3. and complex number 2 ಇಂದ ಆ ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾವೆ, ಕಾಂಪ್ಲೆಕ್ಸ್ ನಂಬರ್ 3 ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ, and here these electron carriers in the case of complex number 3 they utilize the energy and transfer electrons from matrix. Actually they transfer the H+ ions from the matrix to intermembrane space. So same kind, complex number 1 will transfer 4 H+ ions from the matrix to the intermembrane space, and as well as the complex number 3 also will transfer the 4 H+ ions from matrix to intermembrane space. So look at these points are very important for NEET examination. And here come to the next one. After the complex number 2 there is a presence of complex number 4, and here this complex number 4 which is also known as a cytochrome C oxidase, and look at the arrangement here. In between complex number 3 and complex number 4 there is a presence of complex number 2, but here complex number 2 will carry the electrons through the ubiquinon only to the complex number 3, not to complex number 4. And remember here complex number 3 will send electrons to complex number 4. So listen carefully here, through the help of an electron carrier cytochrome C. Cytochrome C in the complex number 3 ಇಂದ ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಗಳನ್ನು ಕ್ಯಾರಿ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಂಡು ಕಾಂಪ್ಲೆಕ್ಸ್ ನಂಬರ್ 4ಗೆ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಫರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಓಕೆ, ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ವಾಟ್ ದ ಅರೇಂಜ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಕೇಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಇನ್ನರ್ ಮೆಂಬ್ರೇನ್ ಸ್ಪೇಸ್. ಸೊ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡ್ಬೋದು ಕಾಂಪ್ಲೆಕ್ಸ್ ನಂಬರ್ ಅರೇಂಜ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ನೋಡಿ, ಒಂದು ಸರ್ತಿ ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ. ಕಾಂಪ್ಲೆಕ್ಸ್ ನಂಬರ್ 1ಇಂದ ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸು ಕಾಂಪ್ಲೆಕ್ಸ್ ನಂಬರ್ 3 ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾವೆ, ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಕಾಂಪ್ಲೆಕ್ಸ್ ನಂಬರ್ 2 will send electron in the same way to the complex number 3. Okay, look at the arrangement. Complex number 1 to complex number 3, and complex number 2 to complex number 3, and here same thing, complex number 3 will send electrons to complex number 4. Okay, complex number 4 which is also known as a cytochrome C oxidase. Okay, and here those electrons from the complex number 3 electron will be carried through the cytochrome C. Okay, so listen here carefully. Complex number 4 will also yield 2 H+ ions from matrix to intermembrane space. Complex number 1 4 H+ ionsಗಳನ್ನು ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಫರ್ ಮಾಡಿತ್ತು, and complex number 3 will transfer 4 H+ ions from matrix to intermembrane space, but the same energy will be reduced. ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಾನ್ ಎನರ್ಜಿ ಕಾಂಪ್ಲೆಕ್ಸ್ ನಂಬರ್ 1 ಮತ್ತು 3 ಕಂಪೇರ್ ಮಾಡಿದರೆ ಕಾಂಪ್ಲೆಕ್ಸ್ ನಂಬರ್ 4ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಾನ್ ಎನರ್ಜಿ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಡೌನ್ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ, ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಇಟ್ ವಿಲ್ ಕ್ಯಾರಿ ಓನ್ಲಿ 2 electrons. Okay, and as well as those cytochrome 4 complex uses that energy and will transfer only 2 H+ ions from matrix to intermembrane space. ಸೊ ಈ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರೋಸೆಸ್ಸಿಂದಾಗಿ ಏನಾಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ, ಇಂಟರ್ ಮೆಂಬ್ರೇನ್ ಸ್ಪೇಸಲ್ಲಿ H+ ಅಯಾನ್ ಕಾನ್ಸಂಟ್ರೇಷನ್ ಹೆಚ್ಚಾಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಸಿ ಐ ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಲುಕ್ ಎಟ್ ಹಿಯರ್, H+ ion concentration is more in the intermembrane space. Okay, and this will create an proton gradient. Okay, this will create an proton gradient, and here that will helpful for the activation of a enzyme called ATP synthase enzyme. So here this ATP synthase enzyme will mainly called as a F0 F1 particle, and here F0 is also known as a proton channel or hydrogen pump anteli karitave. So here whenever the hydrogen concentration is more in the case of intermembrane space, so this will create an gradient, and then whenever H plus ion concentration is more in the intermembrane space, the F0 particle activity will becomes more, and here this F0 will act as a hydrogen pump channel. Okay, and it will just transfer the H plus ion nearly. So when 4 H plus ions passes from the proton channel or to the F1, it will change the conformation in the case of ATP synthase. See, ATP synthase, which also known as a F1 particle. So ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವಾಗ H plus ions F0 channel through pass ಆಗುತ್ತೋ, then there is a conformational change will be occurs in F1 particle. F1 particle ಅಲ್ಲಿ conformation change ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. So here then it will create an ATP molecule from ADP. So assume that whenever and hydrogen ions will be passes through the F0 particle and passes through the intermembrane space to the matrix. ನೋಡಿ ಈ ಒಂದು ಕಂಡೀಷನ್ ಮಾತ್ರ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಕಾಂಪ್ಲೆಕ್ಸ್ ನಂಬರ್ 1 and 3 and 4 ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಕಂಪೇರ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ here H plus ion passes from matrix to intermembrane space, but in the case of a complex number 5, which is also known as the ATP synthase enzyme, see here in this condition the H plus ions will mainly transfer from intermembrane space to the matrix. Okay, and while passing, the ATP synthase enzyme will be activate and convert an ADP into ATP. Okay, so this is how the ATP will be prepared, and here at the final step at the case of F1 particle, and this process we can call it as a oxidative phosphorylation. Okay, oxidative phosphorylation, that means in the case of complex number 4, the electrons will mainly received by the oxygen atom, and that will convert into water molecule. So as you know that the final product produced by the respiration process, that is what water molecule, and as well as carbon dioxide will also releases, and those carbon dioxide mainly released in the case of Krebs cycle, and water molecule will be produced at the end of the process in the case of complex number 4. Okay, and that is what we can call here oxygen will receive those electrons and convert into H2O molecule, and here H plus ions yavaga F0 in the pass agutto, it will activate ATP synthase enzyme, and it will helpful in the conversion of ADP to ATP. So ADP will bind with the inorganic phosphate and it will convert into ATP. So this adenosine triphosphate is energy molecule will be prepared at F1 particle in matrix. So that will prepare towards the matrix. ATP prepare ಆಗುವಂಥ ಲೊಕೇಶನ್ ನೋಡಿದಾಗ that is in the case of a matrix. Okay, so this is how energy molecules will be created in the case of mitochondria. As you know that here this is the matrix. Okay, and here is the intermembrane space, and this is for the inner membrane. Okay, and here whenever those H plus ions passes through the F0 particle, and F1 becomes activate and will convert ADP. So here inorganic phosphate will bind to the ADP, and that will convert into ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Okay, so this is how the energy molecule will be prepared in the case of a matrix of mitochondria. So just remember brief of about the flow of electrons here. In the case of NADH, see from NADH molecule whatever the electrons will be released, those will be carried by the complex number 1, and through ubiquinone electron carrier they send electron to complex number 3, and here cytochrome C will carry the electrons to the complex number 4, and finally will be received by the oxygen atom and convert into H2O molecule. Okay, so here NADH flow chart navali nodidaga whenever the electrons will be formed by the or released by the NADH molecule will be transferred from these locations. So remember once again, so complex number 1 those electrons received by the complex number 1, and then through the ubiquinone they send the electron to complex number 3, and then through the cytochrome C electron carried to the complex number 4 and then received by the oxygen atom or molecule, and then they convert into H2O molecule. Okay, and the electrons produced by the FADH2 molecule mainly received by the complex number 2. Why? Because complex number 2, which we can also call it as a succinate dehydrogenase enzyme. So FADH2 molecule will produce 2 electrons, and those carried by the complex number 2, and through ubiquinone send electron to complex number 3, and by the help of a cytochrome C it will send electron to complex number 4 and finally received by the oxygen and convert into H2O molecule. Okay, this is an overview of or the flow chart of electrons from NADH and as well as FADH2. Okay, so here remember oxidative phosphorylation in the last step, that is in the case of a complex number 5. Electrons pass through electron transport system and energy is released. Here energy released is used to pump H plus ions into intermembrane space. So what are the electrons energy will be released by the FADH2 and NADH2 molecule, helpful for the transferring of H plus ion into the intermembrane space. And here H plus ions flows back to the matrix through ATP synthase complex number 5, and here ADP bind with inorganic phosphate and forms into ATP, and this we can call it as a phosphorylation. So addition or deletion of the phosphate group to the molecule, which we can call it as a phosphorylation, and the total process we can call it as a oxidative phosphorylation, so which depends only on a oxygen molecule. Hence this process is known as aerobic respiration. Okay,